growing up, I thought I was going to be, an architect, and then I thought I was going to be an actuary, and then I thought I was going to do agronomy.
I was a theoretical physicist, always grew up thinking I'd be a theoretical physicist.
I wanted to become a physician, I'd say since the age of 9 or 10, based on television. I loved Marcus Welby and Joe Gannon. I wanted to be just like them because they helped people and everyone was happy at the end of their show.
When I was 6, my younger brother, who was at that time 2, passed away. And I think that was, at a very young age, an awakening to the gravitas, if you will, of life. I became very mature at that moment.
I was a biology major in college, and that really interested me, and I liked the idea of using that skill as part of my vocation.
Initially I was a psych major, and then my dad said, well, maybe as a psychiatrist you'll have the ability to help a larger group of people.
And for a while I actually thought of going into ICU medicine or ER medicine, because I worked in the Bronx. The ER was a really exciting place, pure adrenaline rush, doors slamming open, people yelling.
I tried as hard as I could never to have a job, if I could. I was 29 when I was an intern. I toyed with the idea of going to law school so that I wouldn't have to actually get a job.
One of the attendings I worked with in the Bronx at Montefiore, who was one of the pediatric hematologist oncologists, who was a wonderful guy, very formal in many ways with the residents, but when I watched him with the kids he was taking care of, he was this incredibly warm, passionate physician, and he became kind of a role model for me.
In surgery, the personalities are different, and some surgeons had a very strong personality, and some were so calm, so even-keeled. And you could see right away that those were the best surgeons. Everything, their patients did well, everything was so clean, everything was so nice, and then you sort of start to emulate. And so you look up to them, and then you say, well, I want to be like this guy.
There were seminal people who caused me to think about medicine as I was thinking of leaving theoretical physics. The first is still a dear friend, John Krigler, and his love of medicine, his scientific integrity, and his enormous affection for the children he took care of made me really think seriously. That almost alone made me think seriously about this being a change of direction that I would like.
Dr. DeSanctis, I remember as an intern, he literally would come and see his patients who were hospitalized 3 or 4 times a day. I would be writing a note at 11 o'clock and he would be checking in on Mr. Jones.
So everyone finds a role model, everyone finds someone to look up to and to emulate. That's never going to go away. No amount of technology or simulation or any kind of evolution in the way doctors are trained will ever replace that important piece.
My training in cardiology, which was here at Mass General, involved close observations of some very well-known senior clinicians. And the patient would feel like that clinician had no other care in the world and that their whole world was shut out, just focused on the patient.
I think there's something in medicine that's similar to other relationships that you have. You can't rush to get to the good stuff. It takes time, it takes diligence, it is a process, and I think the story of the patient unfolds over time.
One of the most important things a physician can do is to listen. So I listen very carefully to what they say, and I make an attempt to actually make a connection with them for that short period of time that I'm with them.
The 2 or 3-year-old brings with them their siblings and their parents and their grandparents. Dealing with that whole family system, which we do as part of all the work that we undertake in the clinic, is in some ways very challenging, in many ways very challenging, but you form relationships with all the different members of that family that I think are really gratifying.
Everybody comes with a different set of expectations and needs. All individuals, they may all have the same disease, but there's always something different about each one.
It's not a case, it's not an operation. It's not, I'm thinking, well, this is a tumor and these are the connections to the blood vessels and this is what I have to do. No, it's a patient, and you can never forget that.
What being a physician allows you to do, to an extent that almost nobody else gets allowed to do, is to really see people when they're in dire need and major distress, where the barriers come down and they're not as defended as they might otherwise be.
I don't need to be reminded that every time I read a CT scan on a cancer patient, that there is a patient waiting with bated breath for the results of that scan.
The proposal had been made that there be an award for some parameters of clinical excellence in the hospital. And then Brian was murdered, and the proposal came up again with the understanding that it would be named in honor of Brian.
It's his legacy, and this is a great legacy for Brian McGovern, to have this award and to have everyone look around them and see who was a Brian McGovern-like physician.
Brian really cared about everybody, and it sounds like a platitude, but in his case it was really true. He loved his patients, he loved his family, loved his colleagues, and they all loved him, and everybody felt that. He really cared about people.
The sense you get from his patients is that although lots of physicians would like to think they're irreplaceable, that he was irreplaceable.
He didn't always just concentrate his efforts on what their electrophysiologic problem was, but really in the context of how their cardiac problem fit into their whole life and even their family, with a tremendous amount of understanding.
I kept asking questions, and he just kept taking the time very slowly and very patiently to answer the question. I knew the first time I met him I was dealing with somebody a little different, very special.
The fellows loved him because he could teach them different ways, and it was never negatively taught.
You have to educate not only the patients, but more importantly, the referring physicians. And he did that admirably.
He saw an incredible number of patients, more than any of us could ever imagine seeing. And he did it with amazing skill and humanity and optimism and humor.
Every kid learns a lot from their parents and watching them and how that molds who they are as a person. One thing I definitely learned was, an avid interest in everything and in the world around me and in what people have to say. And one thing that was, particularly great about him was that he was so fun to converse with. I want to go into medicine too, so I think I, learned, an interest in science and an interest in people and in helping people to feel better.
I think Brian thought of himself as a pretty simple guy. Extraordinarily funny, extraordinarily kind, extraordinarily bright.
Brian McGovern had the sixth sense, had that instinct, had the knowledge of how to make the right call for the patient.
Taking care of patients in a objectively correct way is the basis of good medicine. There's an evidence base, there's a science base, there is a right thing to do.
But besides the right call and the right knowledge, the other feature is his ability to have a connection to the patient.
Because people are so frightened, because they have so little knowledge of what lies ahead of them, a good connection with a patient at a personal level makes a world of difference, and that's what the award is about in part, and that's a huge part of what makes a good doctor from the patient's standpoint.
It's not only the relationship of the physician to his or her patient, it's the relationship of the physician to his or her colleagues. Someone like Brian, you would know that if you had a problem in which you needed his assistance, he wouldn't mind at all if you called him, whether or not he was officially the person to be called at that moment or not. You knew he knew the patient, you knew the patient trusted his judgment, you trusted his judgment, and that's pretty hard to replace.
So the essence of this award is that it's from peer review, it's recognition by one's colleagues, and that means a lot to clinicians who are giving it their all every day.
It was great. It was great. It was a very nice feeling, and at the same time a challenge to say, well, if I'm supposed to be that good, well, I better be good.
Well, I got a page by Dr. Torchiana, and my first thought was, oh no, what did I do? Why am I in trouble?
I was very flattering, but I was thinking, wow, I certainly take pride in my work, and I know I work hard, but there's all these other terrific people around me, and as I said, nothing I do here that I think is any good is something I do on my own. I do it with this huge collection of other people, and we do it together, and I'm proud of the fact that we have this big team of people that do all this together.
is gratifying to know that my peers recognized in me something so wonderful. I certainly recognize it in them.
And I just hope that I continue to carry the ideals of Brian McGovern and his excellence and how he took care of patients.
A good rapport with the patient starts with the ability to listen.
You'll be amazed if you are a good listener and give the patient time and space to tell you their story, that over time the story will come out.
You know, one of the challenging things with medicine now is that we have to do everything so quickly that sometimes I feel like I don't have time to listen.
You need to see the patient. You need to feel the patient. You need to have that eye contact with the individual, and that's one of the beautiful things of medicine. I hope we don't lose that.
There's no question that there are increasing administrative demands that we're all wrestling to figure out how to manage those, and I think that's something we're all learning how to do right now, and it's not necessarily an easy learning process.
The challenge is for us to be clever and find the way to still do things in a very good way and adapt to that change. I mean, there's no question, change is here. That's not gonna go away.
There is a creative and innovative culture here where we are problem solvers.
There's something great about the atmosphere here, about the combination of excellence, dedication, and people who know how to have a connection and empathize.
An incredible wealth of talent and also of compassion here.
I think a lot of people here, myself included, are elevated by the ground we stand in.
This is really, really a special place. I think it's clear that all of us who work here feel proud to work here.
Brian was a vivid image, so he was a good person to model this after. We hope this award in his name and the recognition of what he personified defines in some way for the physicians of MGH what our role model is for clinicians.
The people who I think of when I think of people who I'd like to see get this award are people who have a sustained, ongoing, unbroken commitment to their patients. Commitment that the buck stops with them, that they are not, for that patient, a cog in a machine. They're the person to whom that patient can come in time of need and can rely on being there.